Hello there and welcome to the Secrets of Organ Playing podcast. I'm your host, Vidas Pinkevičius. Welcome to Secrets of Organ Playing podcast number 102. Today is Sunday, July the 9th, 2017. Today's guest is a Chilean American organist, harpsichordist, and musicologist Felipe Dominguez. He is a graduate of Brigham Young University, where he studied organ and harpsichord with Douglas Bush and Don Cook, and achieved Bachelor's of Music and Master of Music degrees there. Felipe has pursued further postgraduate organ construction in Europe with Edoardo Belotti, Hans Davidsson, Francesco Cera, and Harald Vogel. Felipe has performed as a soloist and in ensembles in Chile, Argentina, the United States, and Italy. He is currently pursuing a Ph.D. in musicology at Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. Since 2011, Felipe has been the organist and assistant music director at First Presbyterian Church of Annandale, Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Area. So today in this conversation, Felipe talks about Chilean organ culture, challenging yourself when you practice your 10,000 hours to become a better organist, and also about the importance of seeking out specialists in various historical periods and national schools of organ compositions. This is a very intriguing conversation. Let's go to the show. So, Felipe, I'm so delighted we finally connecting you on another side of Atlantic in Washington, D.C., right?
Correct. Yeah, that's where I live.
And I'm in Lithuania, on the Baltic coast, east side of the Baltic Sea, and we are hours apart, but we share a common passion for pipe organ. And I'm sure our listeners from 89 countries around the world will be very eager to know more about you, your work, your experiences, right? And your advice, basically, how to be better organist, how to get constantly better at what you do. So thank you so much for your time and generosity. You're very generous, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure, and I was honored that you consider me for this, because I've looked at some of your other episodes and some of the people that you've had on, and so I definitely was honored that you consider me for this. So thank you so much.
Great. I'm very, very curious always to meet new people who have never actually physically met, but I feel that we'll be having a wonderful conversation, and I just usually like to imagine we're having a virtual cup of cappuccino together and chatting about the things that we both love and enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like
for starters, could you share with our listeners a story how you first fell in love with the organ?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from Chile. Chile is South America, right next to Argentina. It's a very long country. So that's where I actually fell in love with the organ first. I was about 15 years old, and I started to learn how to play the piano because I wanted to play the organ or play the keyboard instrument for my congregation where I worshiped. And there was nobody else to play, and they didn't have an organ. They just have a small Casio keyboard that you could go on and play the hymns on that. So I taught myself how to play so I could accompany the hymns. And eventually I started studying piano at a conservatory, and that's where I met an organist who's a very good friend of mine now, who was my first teacher. His name is Edgardo Campos. He lives in France, in Paris now, and he's an organist there. But he was an organist in a cathedral in Santiago. So I lived about 8 hours from Santiago. So one day he took me up there to the church to see the organ. And the organ had been built by an Argentinian organ builder who had studied with Caballero. His name was Morettini.
Yeah.
He was Italian, and then traveled to Argentina and built many organs in Argentina and also in Chile. And his organs are a la Caballero. They're very, very romantic, very French romantic. So I heard that organ for the first time in a concert, and I just fell in love with the sound. I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sitting down there, and when that first chord, I think the first thing he played in the program was the toccata, the Bach D minor toccata, and I was just captivated. I just couldn't believe the sound that was coming out of the instrument, and it's been a love affair with the instrument ever since.
So Felipe, it's a very fascinating story, right? You met pipe organ in a country where we don't know much about the pipe organ culture, right? But I'm sure they have, beautiful organs which date back centuries ago, right? Built in the maybe Spanish style, maybe even English style, I would say. Also, do you remember anything about the Chilean organ culture from that times?
Actually, it's a very it's very interesting. In Chile and in South America in general, there was when the first Spanish colonizers came, they started building organs in the major cathedrals, obviously because they were almost a need for the services. But then there was sort of a blackout period where there weren't many organs built, and there was a revival when the economy started to do better in the richer countries like in Chile and Argentina and Brazil. So in about the 1800s, there was sort of a revival of organ building. And that's how in Chile, for example, we ended up with about 11 Caballero organs, I believe, that were purchased by congregations all over the country. And I think most of them are not playable now because they fell into disrepair. But there's a good number of fine organs. There was also organs imported from England. Most of the organs that survive now are from the Romantic era. There's one organ that was built in the Baroque period that's in the cathedral that it's being studied now. And there is actually a fellow who's studying, and his name escapes me now, but he's writing a dissertation on this organ specifically, and he's studying at Oxford. So that'll be an interesting, once he completes his work, it will be interesting to see the history of the organ, the Baroque organ in the Cathedral of Santiago. But anyways, there is a long tradition and a history of organ building. Unfortunately, there's no much left of that now, and the organ culture is not very big. There's actually, you cannot study organ really formally in a university in Chile, at least. That's why I had to leave the country to study organ, because there was no program for organists. So the situation is not very very promising right now, but there are many young organists that are being trained elsewhere and coming back to Chile. So that may be the way that, in the future the culture is revived.
Uh-huh. You know, Felipe, you are the first or the second, actually, organist from South America, originally from South America, whom I interviewed on this podcast. And I talked before that with the organist from Argentina.
Okay.
And it was also a similar situation, and very dramatic changes are needed. Beautiful instruments from the past, but vastly undervalued and in not in a very good shape, right? In need of quality restoration. And musicians are not paid very well in churches, right? A similar situation, I suspect, are in Chile, is in Chile. So it's interesting. Do you have plans to go back and revive organ culture back home?
Well, as of right now, I don't have plans to move back, but I have been back a few times, and in fact, I was there last year in my hometown, and I played a concert. So it was very well attended. The church was packed. It was a Lutheran church. So I'm definitely trying to help that way. With the culture, and eventually one of my long-term plans is to write a organ manual in Spanish for people to just teach themselves how to play the organ. There are some that have been written in the last century, but I think they're definitely outdated with older techniques and older pedagogical methods. So I think that's definitely needed. And the thing about Spanish is that there's so many people that speak Spanish, from Mexico all the way down to Chile, Argentina, and then in Spain, in Europe. So you definitely have a large audience, and there's definitely a need for something like that, for a pedagogical method.
Big market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I met, not physically but online, another organist from Chile, and he organizes, I think, festival in Valparaiso.
Yeah, I think it's Christian Sunt. Is that correct?
I think
Yeah,
another, not Christian.
I know a few people that do that in Valparaiso, so they have some nice instruments there.
Yeah, it's good that somebody is really taking a lead, right, and taking responsibility. Maybe the situation is not the best in terms of finances right now, but maybe the interest will rise when things get started a little bit, and because now we are living in a global economy, right? Even a festival in Chile could have fans from all over the world, right, supporting this cause through Kickstarter, for example, or Indiegogo or other platforms. It's very possible today, but of course, a lot of competition. You have to rise above the crowd because everybody is doing these online things. But technology is there, and we just have to learn to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely just changing the subject a little bit. I've seen the work that you've done, and I was very pleased on how you've kind of pioneered certain online marketing and materials, and it's very good what you're doing. That's definitely, I think, a path that and an example that we can follow as organists. Promote your work and try to get people interested in that. So,
and I think we're living in those days when the role of the gatekeepers are diminishing. Gatekeepers meaning big
Right.
agencies, right, for organists, management organizations are diminishing because attention is so scarce now, and people are everywhere doing their own things, and they also are struggling, and the music industry is struggling. So if you even hire an agent, professional agent, still an organist has to do the work themselves, right, to promote. So sometimes it's not even worth, hiring an agent.
Yeah, I think so. Today though, that you have to be creative, I think, to make a living, because on top of developing your art, you have to make a living. Back in the day, people had patrons who gave them funding so they wouldn't have to worry about the basic needs. But those type of arrangements don't exist anymore so much. There may be some exceptions, but we have to figure out a way to make a living at the same time while developing our art. And I think you've tapped into something that it's an example to follow. And like you said, the gatekeepers their influence is going down, so we have more power individually as organists to
Yeah.
promote ourselves.
One of the easiest thing to do, Felipe, for everybody, for any organist who wants to share their art, basically is not to hide it under the table and maybe show under special occasion like a concert or special solemn celebration in a church, right? We all record that and share it on YouTube. That's understandable. But what I'm talking about is sharing the process, which leads to the result. Maybe day-to-day activity, maybe a picture of the organ that you visited recently, right? Maybe an interview with the organ you had at the coffee table, just like we're talking right now, having a virtual cappuccino. You could have a real cappuccino with a friend, right? And with their agreement, you could record it and post it on your platform, anywhere. And if you're doing this regularly enough and long enough, it's like a snowball effect. People will start to notice this and start to follow you. It's basically you're taking the leadership. That's what I started doing this. I'm not a very special technically skilled person at all. I just learned on the go, basically, because creativity and technology are so interconnected now that a simple organist like myself can do those things very easily. If you can push the button, you can do these things, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
So let me share a little bit how I ended up in the United States, if you don't mind.
Wonderful. It's very interesting. Please.
So I was, like I said before, obviously I was in Chile, and there was no way to study down there. So I started looking for opportunities outside the country to study. And that's how I met a professor online, again, from Brigham Young University in Utah, Douglas Bush. So he passed a few years ago of cancer, and it's been a difficult time because he was a dear friend and a mentor. But he connected me with some people, and he basically he believed in me before I believed in myself. So he asked for some videos of me playing, and then he said, "You need to come here." And he started to plan for me to come to the United States. So eventually, after school, I got a scholarship to go to Brigham Young University and study organ there in Utah.
Mm-hmm. This is a wonderful university today because they have a good and very creative organ program right there. And I've interviewed some of the students there too. And they seem to be doing very creative work in terms of learning the pedagogy aspect of the organ. For example, one of their organ students interviewed me online. and it was part of their organ pedagogy assignment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody in the department had to interview maybe 10 or 20 people, 20 organists, right, from the organ world, and we connected and we met through Skype, I think, and it was wonderful. Just like I'm talking to you right now, he talked with me about similar things. I got to share my story, and this was part of the assignment. And that person, this organist, might develop those interviewing skills, and later they will be invaluable in his profession.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a good program in terms of the quality of the instruction, as well as the available materials, both in the library. The library is fantastic. I mean, there's you can find pretty much anything you ever need to learn organ, and as far as repertory scores and everything. And there's also good instruments available for practice and performance. So it was definitely a good program, and I really enjoyed it and learned very much from it. So I did a bachelor's there, and then I also continued to do my master's in organ performance. And then I moved to Washington, D.C. to do a master's in political science. That's how I ended up here. But now, after I finished my degree in political science, George Washington University, now I'm pursuing a Ph.D. in musicology at Catholic University of America. So it's not a performance degree, but it's definitely something that's giving me a lot of tools to explore some areas in the organ world, but from the musicological lens.
Right. You are so open-minded and broad. You have broad cultural horizons, and you broaden your experience this way, right? You're not only studying organ playing, but you have a political science experience. Tell us a little bit about that. What led you to that sphere?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think when I was in Chile, I was never really interested in politics or in society. But when I was at Brigham Young University, I actually did a second degree in political science there as well during my bachelor's. I just became very interested in the key is how the world works, how things work. When you go to a big city, you go to Paris, you go to London, you go to Washington, D.C., and you see that things just work. You see the cars moving, you see people get fed, So that's really what interests me, is how societies work, how all these people are able to live together and pursue their own interests, and while at the same time getting together to pursue common interests like security. For example, you have a police force, fire department, you have different programs that people get together to fund those programs for the good of the community. So that's definitely what interests me, as well as just some basic philosophical questions about government and the founding of the United States, which was based on on the philosophical writings of the previous generation, right? The founders of the United States kind of put that into practice for the first time. Before that's why they called the United States an experiment, because nobody had ever done this kind of self-government, constitutional republic that was founded. And obviously a lot of countries later followed the model. But anyway, so that's what interests me so much about politics. It's a very broad category.
So the first constitution in the world was created in the United States, right?
The what?
The first constitution in the world was created in the United States, right?
Yes. So the first constitutional republic, yes, definitely. Now, the England actually has a much longer tradition of legal balance of power than the United States, but that's called common law. There's no really constitution because things can evolve as the laws are passed. The difference with the United States is that the Constitution actually sets up a framework that cannot be changed unless it's done through the proper amendment process, which is set forth in the Constitution. So there are certain things that certain laws that you just cannot pass. For example, you cannot violate the rights of certain people because all the laws are measured against that Constitution. So that's the difference. But yeah, the United States was the first constitutional republic.
It's like a civic Bible, right?
Correct. Yeah, but it's a legal document. So correct.
Which is the basis of our modern society.
Correct. Yeah.
Do you know what was the second constitution in the world after the United States?
I think after the French Revolution, there was some attempts there, but I'm not sure. That's actually a good question. I know in Latin America, for example, many countries, Argentina, Chile, try to emulate the constitutional model of the United States. But my feeling is that Europe followed. There were some countries in Europe that followed before South America.
It was actually Lithuania. The second constitution of the United States was Lithuania. Our Commonwealth with Poland, we had a Commonwealth and the common country with Poland. We had this treaty, and our constitution was created after that, after the United States. Yes, very old. But of course, we got this Russian occupation started with Tsar regime at the end of the 18th century. It all stopped. Our constitution didn't work anymore. Yeah,
that's actually, and I know we're kind of getting off the organ topic, but it's actually related because the fact that we have stable governments allows us to develop our art. If we didn't have a stable government with the government protections that we have, organs will be the last thing that people will be thinking about because they will be thinking about not getting killed, right? So, but the last point I wanted to make is just that this is the best form of government, is a constitutional republic that guarantees protections. A lot of people always talk about democracy, but really democracy is not a good form of government because a majority at any point could override the rights of a minority. That's what a constitutional republic prevents. It doesn't matter how big the majority is. You can have a 90% majority, but the Constitution will prevent them from, running over the rights of the minority. And that's the best form of government. And that's really the governments that we have all over the country. We really don't have a democracy. The most famous democracy was Athens, right? That lasted for about 500 years. But we really don't have a democracy today. But a lot of people speak that way. When you hear the news, they talk about democracy. It's not really a good form of government. So we really shouldn't really talk about that so much. We should talk about constitutional republics.
Yeah, that's what it is in most of the Western countries, right? Constitutional republics, exactly, to have this balance of power and influence between the people, the government, and majority and minority, and everything in between. Wonderful. It's so interesting to talk with you about those things, Felipe, because not always we can meet such broad-minded and culturally sophisticated organists, right? Many times organists are only worried about organs and how to play the notes correctly, right? And here you are studying the constitutional republic and those things ancient democracy of Athens, and how the world runs, right? It's so fascinating that you have this mentality of openness.
Yeah, and to be honest, I am an optimist. I think things are getting better around the world, and that's good for us as organists and as musicians, as artists, because we need to, and we need to participate too. So, for example, here in the United States, we have the National Endowment for the Arts, which is a government-funded program that allows funding for artistic pursuits. So for plays, theater, art, and it includes music as well, and organs and organists. Probably a small percentage for organists, but regardless, there is a move now to cut some of that funding. So we should be engaged as musicians in politically, and try to pursue our interest and try to influence the government, because we believe that arts are a balm that can sort of, what was it? They say tame the wild beast, right? So it's a balm in society that tends to color and help a society become more civilized. So I really believe that without the arts, without music, without art and other things, people wouldn't be as civilized as they are. So
exactly, and you're talking about influencing, let's say, governmental decisions, right? Not to cut art funding, let's say, right? An individual could do this, go to a senator or a governor, right, and advocate about the importance of the art in this community, right?
absolutely.
But that person in power usually will not listen to just anybody from the street, right?
Right.
You
Yeah.
have to have.
So again, it's important to have a strategy and to understand how it works. But definitely, if you collect a good number, there's always strength in numbers, right? So if you have one or two people talking, probably won't do much. But if you can gather a community of hundreds, then that's a different tune. People will listen. They will have to.
Yes, because now internet is like a megaphone. It's
Exactly.
an amplification machine, amplification tool. Whatever you tell online gets shared and amplified, right? So your influence might be quite big. A simple blogger with a few thousand readers who are very engaged can really change things in this community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
So wonderful, Felipe. What it is that you do as an organist nowadays? I know you are an organist at the Presbyterian Church, right?
Correct. Yeah. So and I was just called to be the music director as well. So we used to have a music director who was a wonderful conductor, Ron Freeman, and he retired. So that responsibility fell onto me now. So I'm the music director and organist at First Presbyterian Church here it's in Annandale, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C. It's about 10 minutes from the Congress. And and it's wonderful. I do have a tracker organ that was built in the 70s. So it's what it's called here in the United States a neo-Baroque organ, which some people don't like him very much because they had issues. The mixtures, for example, are extremely bright. The cornet is very loud and very, very nasal. But I like it, and this instrument was sort of part of children of its era, of the aesthetics of the time, and I think it's good to preserve them because it's a good historical case study. It's a wonderful instrument, though. I really enjoy it. very much.
Plus, it challenges you as a professional, right? As an artist to adapt, to do things differently than you would expect, right? If you go to a symphonic organ or a romantic organ, or even a real Baroque organ in Europe, right? You would do things differently. And here you have this neo-Baroque sound, which also might sound wonderful, but you have to think a little bit deeper how you could play with those bright mixtures. For example, maybe you could transpose an octave downward some of the passages that need. For example, in Vidor toccata, entire Vidor toccata could be played one octave lower with those mixtures, and it would sound very, very wonderful, just like in
That's a good
France.
idea, actually. I hadn't thought of that. That's a great idea.
So that's one of the possibilities to adapt to this harsh sound of neo-Baroque and make it more solid and more foundation-like. Wonderful. What other activities do you do in church besides playing the organ and leading probably the choirs?
Right. So that's the other thing. It's I have to lead the choir and choose the music for the choir. We have a small choir of about 10 people, between 7 and 10, depending on the season. But they're fairly good singers, so we're able to do fun things. Now the key here is to pick a wide variety of music, so people can be exposed to and can be not entertained, but otherwise they get bored if it's all Mozart or if it's all Bach. So we try to do some music from the older repertoire, and also we try to do like spiritual songs, which are very upbeat and can be very, very exciting. There's also a lot of modern Christian choir music that's been written now that are, it's also very, very exciting to do. So we try to mix it up, make sure people get a variety of repertory. The other thing is we actually have a concert series that we put together. So I need to organize that and make sure we get people to perform. It can be organists or also instrumentalists or singers. So that's something definitely. Maybe we'll have you one of these days.
Thank you. You are very generous. It's so fascinating to hear an organist share experience in the church, that you have a support for what you do, right? You probably the pastors and the community congregation elders in Presbyterian Church, they all get together and think about your music program and say, we like what Felipe is doing. Let's support it, and maybe our community and congregation can really benefit from that, and our little First Presbyterian Church can be a center of our cultural activities in our community, right? And this is broad thinking again and strategic, and what you're doing is so valuable.
Yeah, we definitely get good support, and we have funding for all the activities we do. We actually just did a major renovation on the organ that was a significant amount of money, and we were able to raise the funds in a year and a half or so, and so we definitely have good support. People like what they see. I think the key is to be creative and to provide, give something back to the community, and then they respond to you.
Yes. And in the case of Presbyterian churches, decisions get made not based on one person's maybe opinion, right? Like a head pastor, but the entire council probably gets together. And that's, I think, wiser than to have one figure who decides what gets picked or what's not, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's we have the elders, the church, and they're all on board with our music program. We have some of them in our choir, so that helps. So yeah, definitely, that's very good.
Excellent. So wonderful, Felipe. It's interesting. You're playing, leading, thinking about the music, and even broader things in life. Could you share an experience with our listeners? How can they get better at being organist? What would be the first step they should take?
Yeah, so that's a good question. One of the things that I've been thinking about lately is there's a fellow here in the United States named Malcolm Gladwell that wrote the book, and the main assumption and what a lot of people are taking out of this book, which I think is a little misleading. He talks about 10,000 hours. That's what it takes for anybody to become a master.
Outliers, right?
What's that?
It's called Outliers.
Outliers, correct. Yeah, that's the book. So, however, the actual scholar who came up with this theory is a fellow. His last name is Erickson, and he's a professor at Florida State University, if I'm not mistaken, and he's actually the one who did a lot of this research and came up with this theory. But his point, he says, it's not necessarily 10,000 hours. That's really not what makes the difference. What makes the difference is something that he calls deliberate practice. And if you read his paper, you can look at this more carefully. But deliberate practice means that every time you sit down, you have to challenge yourself beyond your comfort level. It's easy to sit down and play a piece that we've played 1,000 times before, and just play for an hour, and that's fine to do. I think that's part of the enjoyment of what we do. But he says when you're practicing something, you have to challenge yourself, and you have to constantly be pushing yourself beyond your comfort level, trying to do something that is hard for you to do, a scale that's difficult, a passage and a piece on a trio sonata that's very difficult, and you just can't get through it. That's what deliberate practice means, and that's what's going to get you to the next level. Not so much the 10,000 hours, but 10,000 hours of deliberate practice.
Yes, you always should strive to be better than you were yesterday, right?
Right.
Better today than you were yesterday, and that's what deliberate practice means. What would be the second step?
Well, so the key is obviously that. Now, one thing that I have done is I think, the repertory in organ music is very wide. We have about 600 years of repertory and many traditions, right? So you have the Spanish repertory, the French classic, the English, the German, Italian, and so forth. These are all very unique languages. They're not all the same. They're very particular, and they're tied to their culture. Now, in particular, I like the older repertory more. Obviously, I play all kinds of music because as a church organist, I have to play a wide variety of music. But what I'm trying to specialize is on the older repertory. And what I have been trying to do is I've tried to seek out specialists in those areas and learn from them about that particular repertory. For example, Hans Davidsson is his specialty, I would say, is the North German repertory, North German Baroque. Mm-hmm. So, Matthias Weckmann, that's something that he has studied very, very carefully and in much detail. He's looked at the documents, and so he has a level of insight of that repertory that, by virtue of the work that he's been doing, that other people don't have. So what I have done is I have studied this music with him. and I have read his dissertation. So I think that's the path that I'm pursuing. I'm trying to seek out specialists in different repertories and trying to learn from them the nuances of the repertory.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Did you go to North German, Gothenburg Organ Academy, where Hans leads summer organ courses every 2 years in Sweden?
Yeah, I've been there, and I've also, about 4 years ago or so, I went to northern Italy to an academy that he does there in the summer.
Marano. Mm-hmm.
Marano, yeah, and that was fantastic. I had a chance to have a few lessons with him on Scheidemann, and it was very good. We had a chance to, in the evenings to sit down and just talk about these things, and it was very good.
Yeah,
there is specialists in this music, and in Spanish music, in French Baroque, in Italian music. Edoardo Belotti is one that I've studied Italian repertory with. He's very good at it. So I think that's a path that I'm pursuing. I think it's the right way, at least for me, because again, this repertory is not all the same. They're all very different. Remember, back in the day, people really didn't travel that much from one side of the. They were born in a town, and they pretty much stayed in the general area. There's a few exceptions, but even Bach never went to Italy, for example, or other places. So, that's all the repertory is very regional, and all the traditions are very local. So I think we need to understand the repertory within its context, rather than to have generalized performance practice about. For example, you will say, all the trills in the Baroque are like this. And you hear these many times from professors and and there is really a lot more nuance to it than that. It really depends on the area and who you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very good advice you're doing. To summarize what you said is probably to take each historical period and each national school of organ composition very carefully and deconstruct what the key elements of it were. And if you study, for example, Cabezon from Spain, do not play it in the same way as you would be doing, let's say, Gabriele, right, from Italy, or Couperin in France, right? Or if you do romantic stuff like Reger from the German standpoint, you play differently than you would be playing Widor or Vierne, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Or Tournemire or
Tournemire, yeah. Wonderful. So, Felipe, I think you have such a broad experience, and people around the world are so inspired by what you are saying right now. And could you share with us a link where they can connect with you or find out more about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is FelipeDominguez.net, and my name spelled out is Felipe. Dominguez is DOMINGUEZ.net. So FelipeDominguez.net. Yeah. And you can find links there to my LinkedIn profile, to my YouTube channel, and Facebook as well.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, Felipe, for this conversation. It's been wonderful to connect with you, and I wish you a very creative year in your community, in your First Presbyterian Church, with your creative leading of the church, musical life around the big neo-Baroque organ that you have. So I think I have a feeling that we'll meet again, even face to face, right?
Yeah, I hope so. Let's stay in touch, and hopefully maybe we'll either have you over here or we'll when I'm in Europe, maybe we'll get a chance to meet.
Okay, thank you so much, and keep creating, and most importantly, probably keep sharing what you have created.
All right, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
If you liked this conversation, I encourage you to visit my blog Secrets of Organ Playing at organduo.lt, where you will find lots of insights, practical advice and training for every area of organ playing. You can subscribe to this blog for free to get your daily dose of inspiration and to be the first to know when any of my future podcasts roll out. I hope to help you reach your dreams in organ playing. I'm Vidas Pinkevičius. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you online really soon.